All right. We back. Sea Talk. Yeah, a little bit, we on Black History Time tonight. Let me tell you why we call it Black History Time. We call it Black History Time because it takes a long time for y'all to recognize and celebrate us. So, anyways, we on FEMA time. Anyways, 20 minutes late. We gonna let some people get in the room and whatnot. Shout out to everybody out there that tunes in and whatnot. Let's go ahead and tag some people, get them in the room, let them know we finally here. And whatnot. We got an interesting show tonight. We talking about and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to say it right every single time. Eviction moratoriums is coming up. And what does that mean for Black folks? What exactly does that mean for Black folks during the pandemic? And you already know the answer that I'm gonna give because it's the most accurate answer, and that it means it's gonna be worse for us once again. Every single time something happens, that it's a pandemic, epidemic, or whatever you want to call it, some kind of crisis, you know it's gonna hit us the worst, for whatever reason. So I'm gonna tag some people, get them in the room and whatnot. Y'all can do the same over there. But and then what's embedded in this conversation tonight is, there's a little bit of like what little subtle outrage, a little disappointment, I guess, because Dave Chappelle got it from the mud, he got it from the poverty, and then he opposing low-income housing in this small little town that he's in. I don't even know if they refer to it as a city. He back in Ohio, where I'm from, and I don't even know where this place is. Only reason why I know where this place is, I want to say it's like Springfield or something like that. Don't quote me on that. Some small town, but he's in this small town to get away from everyone, and he's paying for his privacy. And he's like, man, they want to expand it. They want to bring in low income housing, and he's like, nah, if y'all do that, I'm out. And I think that there's this implicit expectation that Dave, because he got it from the mud where he grew up in, I don't know, I think it was like, DC or something like that, that he owes something to low income housing, no matter what, even if it's, white people. But I think that even if it was Black people, he has reason to, to protect his privacy and protect his investment as a homeowner. And that has some intersection with these eviction moratoriums, because us as Black people who grew up poor, impoverished, economically poor, not necessarily poor when it comes to value systems, we understand that the pandemic put a lot of Black people out, and we understand what it felt like to be a tenant when you lost your job, or stuff was a little bit more tight, during the pandemic, and you needed some help with your rent and whatnot. We understand that. Okay. And that, you needed a break and, from paying, and so you could stack your dough, and, that it's, already stacked against you. Also, we all also know, a lot of us come from households with people who can afford to have their own homes and be Black landlords. And we know how rough it is when you're seeing your relatives. I got a story I'm going to share a little bit later about my mom, how hard it is to get, yes, Black people out of your place. That you have, understood their plight, what I'm saying? What they're going through. But at the same time, do they really care what you're going through as a landlord? Because now you've aligned yourself with like, the elite, the authority figure, the establishment, like you're the landlord, what I'm saying? So you're the enemy now, but you was not the enemy when you picked them to live in your place, even though the competition was thick. So it's just like, there has to be some kind of way that we can, not only survive, but actually thrive as not only landlords, but also tenants. And that's what I wanted to talk about today on the show. It's like, how should Black people who are landlords treat other Black people with less privilege during this? And was Dave Chappelle wrong, for opposing the low-income housing? And I will say real quick, let me get this out of the way. February 26th, live at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we will be at Life Enrichment Bookstore with the Griot Party Experience, broadcasting on YouTube and the Griot Party, Logic On Man, and Logic On Man TV pages on Facebook. So I'll be mentioning that again. Follow the links and whatnot. But the Griot Party Experience, spoken word storytelling at its finest, will be back at you February 26, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, live in person at Life in Richmond Bookstore and the historic Columbia City of Seattle, and also on social media. But, let's talk about Dave real quick. I mean, was Dave Chappelle wrong for opposing low-income housing, being brought to his neighborhood in his small town in Ohio, that he pays, I'm pretty sure, pretty good money for his privacy and whatnot?
In terms, as I said a little earlier, in terms of business, no, he is not. But I kind of do wonder, like, who could live next door to Dave Chappelle in that small town anyway, though? I couldn't help, like, I wonder how much his house will be worth, whatever neighborhood he moving in. I kind of wonder how much his house would be worth and how many people in that area can afford to live next door or even in the same neighborhood as him. I kind of was, now sitting here thinking about it, I kind of wondered that. And Dave Chappelle, he wasn't really poor like the average black person had. I think he was a couple steps up. Like I don't think he had as much money as his white peers, but but he had more probably than an average black person growing up. At least that's the point I'm getting. That was his investment. So if he feels that affordable housing will hurt his property value, that will mess with his money. In terms of a businessman, he's in the right. But I kind of can see how people can feel some kind of way about that, considering a lot of people tend to take his stand up to heart a lot. And then when that comes into play and you're looking at the decision he's making in real life, it's like, well, wait a minute. You're no different than what white people do to us. So it's mixed feelings, but again, it's his investment, his money.
You think it's a combination of like people are already still mad at him about his last special, where he kind of like people say he punches down, and this is just yet another way that and revealing that he is a part of the elite, and what I'm saying, everything we don't like about people, specifically black people, were privileged.
Pretty much. I think that's what triggered a lot of people. I mean, that's my shot in the dark.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about anybody else.
I don't know what Bobby's doing. I think Bobby's doing some chores over there, a little bit of redirect.
I'm cooking over here.
Okay, man. I need to cook up some conversation, man. Come on. I mean,
I honestly think Precious, hits a lot of it. I think that people are emotionally triggered. Even black people are emotionally triggered by seeing other black people accumulate wealth and then protect those interests. And it's one of the more interesting things because it kind of reminds me of like when black children are in school sometimes and they make fun of each other for doing well in school or for doing anything that's close proximately to what they associate with whiteness or success. And so it's like an ultimate inferiority complex on some level because we're not allowed to do well. And that's what bothers me about it. So yes, on one hand, I understand that people want to feel like Dave is going to be more responsible to his community than this. But at the same time, I don't want to make it about Dave. I just want to believe as a people that you should be allowed to own private property and do everything in your power to protect that private property. I think that's a totally reasonable thing for black people to do, regardless of whether they're a millionaire or 100,000-aire or have 5-digit income. Like, you should be able to want what's best for your personal property. And that's something that it doesn't seem like black people are allowed to do.
What you think, Trisha?
I think I have other problems with Dave Chappelle, but it has nothing to do with this. I think punishing him for being a capitalist in a capitalist society, it's kind of silly. I mean, we aren't demanding that Elon Musk builds low-income housing. So why are we talking about Dave Chappelle and his responsibility there? I mean, he's he's clearly a capitalist. He's in a capitalist society. So why focus on his reaction to this housing? And also, from what I understand, the builder is like this pro-Trumper, had created this plan that really didn't create affordable housing. So it was more in name only. So yeah, two capitalists butt heads and disagreed. So in a capitalist site, so that's
and I was also reading on. I was hearing different stories on. They were trying to make houses that actually was worth like 150K, worth 350K. So they really were boosting up the price on those houses. So that was another issue I heard what's going on with that. And I could play devil's advocate on this, but I don't know how that would go if I play that little game though. So I'm gonna let y'all get your...
Let's hear. Because
I was thinking, because that area that Dave Chappelle is investing in, I don't think it's that many black people that live there anyway. And if I'm not mistaken, according to what I've heard on the news for many years, mostly white people are on assistance compared to every other ethnicity. Right. So would that mean building that affordable housing would help out the poor white people? And I don't think it would necessarily help the black poor people if there's any there.
Yeah,
that's just my theory.
Yeah, I don't know how many black people are there right now, and I don't know how many black people it will attract by putting low income housing there. And here's the third thing: no matter how many black people that it will attract, I don't know how many black people are going to qualify.
And there's that.
As opposed to their white counterparts.
Right.
Because we know how this works. We know how, a lot of us do. So for instance, when they want to gentrify an area, or low income housing just means there's government assistance.
Unless it's like how they do it in Seattle with helping a relative find a place here of, the developer will build this huge luxury building and they'll have 2 or 3 units that are low income. And I know in the case of helping the relative, the 2 units that were low income in this building that was over, in South Lake Union, they were the only units that you walked into the bedroom. So it was a way to communicate to everyone else that, you're the 2 low income people, because they have these 2 1-bedroom apartments that you walk immediately into the bedroom, versus all the other 1-bedrooms had you walked into a living room. And that was their low income housing. So out of a building with like 400, I don't think it was maybe 200 apartments that they were charging. This was a couple of years ago, like $3,000 a month for. They had 2 low income ones that I think we were charging like $1,200, and that was low income. So there are ways to communicate to everyone else that, these are the poor people that are in the building versus everyone else in the building. That was low income.
Oh yeah, for sure. What I'm saying is, when you qualify for low income housing, if I'm not mistaken, it's my understanding that comes with some kind of assistance from the government. They have priced that unit or whatever as low income housing because it's being assisted somehow by the government.
Yes, that's correct.
And that's part of what the work that your guy in the past administration was trying to do with HUD. That's what we specialize in. Yeah.
Ben
Carson. I don't know what the sister's name is, and they keep putting black people in these positions too. And I that's a little it's a little dog dog whistling there, but I guess best based on their background, they might be the most qualified person for that. But I just find it really interesting that
Ben Carson,
a neurosurgeon.
No. What I'm saying is
for HUD.
What I'm saying is, Ben Carson, somewhere down the line, he probably was poor. He probably did get it from the mud. Like
No. I was saying that it's a man who's a neurosurgeon is most qualified to lead housing and urban development. I'm missing the link. That's all.
No. What I was getting at,
easily.
No, listen. No, I understand that point. No, I don't think he was qualified. No, not in that sense. But what I'm saying is, I think it's a little dog whistling and says, who knows more about being poor than a black person or a descendant of slavery? I think that's what they're trying to say. You know what I'm saying? I checked out an interview with the sister on the Breakfast Club not too long ago, and she was breaking some stuff down about how she wants to change and modify some things that was done in the past administration with Ben Carson, and how she doesn't really feel he was very effective. And like, duh, go figure. But I know my daughter, has benefited from the low-income housing here in Seattle, and I agree. I think Trisha said it offline that because you're black and you are a recipient of or benefactor of low-income housing does not mean you're gonna tear up the joint. And I think that's an unnecessary and very gross stereotype. I think it all comes down to value systems, and that's and with low income does come too many times, not every single time, not every single person, but too many times it does come with a specific value system that says, I'm going to only be here for a little bit. They'll fix it if I break it. You know what I mean? I have nothing invested in there. There's all kind of research that goes behind that. People tend to take care of things a lot better when they have ownership of it and they can invest in it. You know what I'm saying? And they're not going to wait for someone else to fix it for them and all this other stuff. You know what I'm saying? They did that with like the abandoned car in the neighborhood, and they put one there and they staged it. And then slowly but surely they start to like knock out a window and walk away. And then they show like over time when it didn't show anyone had ownership of that car, no one, really valued it. Next thing you know, people had taken the tires off of it and this, that, and the third, because there's like, you know what I'm saying? No one wants it. No one has value in it. And I think that's what a lot of people fear when they let quote unquote low income, economically status people come into their neighborhood, because they think they're going to bring a lower value system. And I think it's fair to think that way based on how the system is rigged and programmed, how the algorithm is set up. You feel me? I can understand why someone would say, oh, you bringing in all these renters. You might not even believe or trust that these renters are low-income status people are going to tear your stuff up. What you're basing your reaction to is that my property rates are going to go down. I mean, my value of my home, my property value is going to go down, regardless of how well they behave, how well they pick up litter, how well, they're getting cats out of the tree. You know what I'm saying? They're looking at my property value is going to go down. And that is how capitalist, feudal type systems work when they want to keep the rich rich and the poor poor. And so I think it's very important that we do some decompartmentalizing, that not everybody who is opposed to low income status people moving their neighborhood means that they think that those people are going to do bad things in the neighborhood. They sometimes are thinking that's just how the algorithm is set up. Like, my property value is going to go down. It'd be good if I had Dave Jones on this show, because he works intimately he has his own business, own real estate business, and I would be good, man. So Dave, stay active in the comments, man. I want to hear your feedback. I should have had you on the show. But anyways, so I know Trish, you talked a little bit offline about how you own some properties right in New Orleans, feel me? And you want to bring, Black people to that area, but at the same time, you want to bring in responsible, tenants with a value system that's going to protect your investment.
Right. And I've had to look at how I approach people. So making sure that I approach them with respect and they have approached me then with respect. So I've had the experience of being, of course, both a renter as well as a landlord. And I remember as a renter, when I had divorced my ex-husband as a single Black woman with 2 Black sons, the experience of continually being rejected for places, the minute it got to a point where I made sure that my sons were in school when I went, they couldn't even be in the car, that magically the places weren't available. They probably thought we were going to destroy the place. So I've tried to ensure that my mentality, so first off, that I want to help Black people come back, but I also want to make sure that I vet, that I just don't make the only qualification. Oh, you look like me, so you're going to, treat the property the same way. And also just so making sure that when they're asking for things like allowances, that I'm still respecting my bottom line, because if I lose the place, then we'll both be in the same situation. But for me, it's really important to make sure that families, particularly Black families, come back to New Orleans and remain in New Orleans. So I know I can't do it all on my own, but I realize that it requires that I have to respect them as well as, as their landlord, and they also respect me.
Yeah. You brought up a real good point in what you just now said. You said, basically, what's the purpose of us both being, you know what I'm saying, in dire straits economically?
Right.
Offline, and I was trying to get the brother on the show. I'm not going to, mention his name. A really close friend of mine had a situation recently during the pandemic where he was renting out his basement. His basement has a two-bedroom apartment. Okay. And so, he heard about this brother through a referral from a high school friend. And this brother was living in his car. So he said, hey, man, pay me like $1,000 a month, blah, 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 whoop-de-woo, come live down there, cool. Then that eviction moratorium hits. And he's like, I ain't got to pay you. And that's the situation that kind of hits me. It's like, I'm not going to pay you because I can't, or because I don't want to, because there's an eviction moratorium and says that, I get a pass, what I'm saying, for how many other months. Anyways, this is how it ends. It ends, of course, with a lot of, lawyers being called and whatnot. It ends with him owing, a really good friend of mine, $25,000 in rental. It ends with him leaving all his stuff, in which my good friend of mine described as he left Sanford & Son downstairs in my basement. So now he has to remove all this stuff. Dude, he could put a lien on dude, you know what I mean? By charging him, all these fees to remove all his junk. He had some animals living down there too. So not only was he Sanford & Son, he was getting his Dr. Doolittle on, you know what I'm saying? But he's like, he moved to Cali. And so my homeboy was like, man, well, I'll just beat you up. He was like, if you beat me up, then I'll take the whole house. You know what I mean? And so, like, this is how people was operating. I
was saying, conversely, so I was impacted by Hurricane Ida, and sorry, but FEMA, no help at all for me. And I think that they didn't really help, particularly Black small landlords, because all the other people I know that they were also completely screwed. We at zero, they gave me $1,500 to repair the roof, and then the insurance didn't pay because they said it was wind damage, and that was an exclusion. So the roof was destroyed, the ceiling, the whole top floor, everything just a mess. And of course, there was still COVID and everything. So my tenants that I really respect and are great, I communicated that, look, I'm being screwed over by FEMA, so I'm going to have to dig into my pocket. And so they offered to help with the construction to repair the place. So that's why it's important to keep communication open. So otherwise, the two of us, they would be, screwed out of a place versus I can't, so keeping the communication open, because we're both what, Black landlord, Black tenant. If we're both suffering but we're keeping communication open that, okay, even if you can't pay me, you can help here. So that's important to realize it as well. And sometimes I guess the setup is that a tenant will automatically think, oh, the landlord is the enemy, because regardless of if you're Black or white, that you're the enemy. But it was important for me to make sure that I'm respecting them, telling that, look, I'm struggling too right now, but we can get through this together.
Yeah. That's that. That's a good outcome. That's ideal, and I think it's important when we're talking about the pandemic and helping each other out when there's dire straits, in front of us. It's like we got to understand that there's multiple ways you can help somebody. Mm-hmm. Like if I was a landlord and your credit report and everything that I know about you financially says you're not a good financial fit to be in my investment, then you know what? I'll give you a finder's fee. Go find someone who's more qualified for it. And that's the way I can give you some money. I help you out. You know what I'm saying? Or you can couch surf for a couple, weeks or something like that. I've been there. But when you start putting stuff in paper, man, people act real funny. People start acting real funny, talking about, well, there's a paper trail here and I paid rent, and so I'm entitled to these rights. It's like, why does the rights have to be to screw someone over? I think that when we get an opportunity to think about self and only self only, too many times we do that. And it's like, I feel like there's a sense of entitlement for privileged Black people and people who are not privileged. I feel like there's a sense of entitlement for privileged people, whether it's earned or not earned, that, look, man, I got this and this is what's entitled to me. I deserve this because of my privilege. And then I think on the other side of it, I think there's a side of it that there's, a percentage of Black people who don't have privilege says you're entitled to give me what you have. Because, you're privileged. And I think that we sometimes think that every single time that there's privilege, that is unearned. And I've been on that side of that too. You know what I'm saying? Where people think that the privilege that I have is unearned. Some of it is. Absolutely. I think me being a heterosexual male is, and the privilege that comes with being male, that's unearned. But a lot of like my education, my status, definitely my salary, to a certain degree, I'm sure implicitly, I've gotten some stuff, but we're not going to sit there and say, because I have privilege, that all of it is unearned. I'm not going there. I can't do that. And so, Carmelita says Dave was, full of shit on this, or S*** T. I'm not sure why we are going to give him a pass for it. At the end of the day, he didn't want folks of a certain tax bracket in his community. He even used language white people use, not a right fit. F out of here. Well, that's one way to look at it. You know what I'm saying? I don't think he was full of crap on it because it's his money. He paid for his privacy. If he says, I'm going to move out of this neighborhood, if y'all move in some of these people, who doesn't have a right to move? And why would we be like, that's wrong for him to move? If the community, look, what's wrong with, especially a white, you know what I'm saying, a community that more than likely practices exclusion? What's wrong with saying to them, if you don't do something that I don't like, I'm going to move? Because you think that whatever's coming in is more valuable than my residency. I don't understand what's wrong with that. Can anybody on the panel help me understand what is wrong with saying, if you don't do what I asked you to do, I'm going to move?
Well, I mean, I think Carmelita's objection is pretty straightforward. It's the idea that the thing that he didn't want was a certain status of person. I do think that that's objectionable, but I think that the second piece of it is, why is he getting a pass? Well, he's getting a pass because we understand that he's being a good capitalist in a capitalist system. He's being an efficient capitalist. So that's why I said the original question is whether we believe in private property and capitalism. Because if you do, then you can't be upset with him for being good at it. You can be mad because what it takes to be good at it sometimes might be viewed as subhuman or as unethical or immoral. But again, the first thing you'll learn in economics is we don't concern ourselves with morality. Like, that's literally the first thing they teach you in the econ class is,
Say that one more time. What did you say, Bobby?
the first thing you learn in economics is that there is no concern for morality. That's the first thing. So if you know that and you look at what Dave is doing, he's just being a completely rational actor. And if we know he's being a rational actor in a system that rewards rational acts, then that's why he's getting a pass, because he's doing what he's supposed to do. But can it still be objectionable morally? Of course.
Let me ask y'all. Thank you for that, Bobby. That was good. I didn't know that whole tidbit about it. That's
look here. Billionaires will become billionaire being good people or have good morals. I said billionaires do not become billionaires because they're some morally good people. They did something that we will find immoral to get to where they are. I mean, am I mad at them for doing such a thing? No, but that kind of played to what Bobby was saying. But again, it kind of brings me back to the question. I'm like, who do Dave Chappelle expect to live next door to? Because how many millionaires live in that area anyway?
I don't know. And what he's saying is the way it is now is going to change, and that I'm not cool with it and I'm leaving. Well, how much is it that us on the outside who say he's full of crap, he's immoral, he's wrong for this, how much get to where they are? I mean, am I mad?
I'm sorry.
Wait, hold on. How many of those people on the outside don't understand what it is to be a celebrity at his magnitude and understand the anxiety that comes with new people coming into the neighborhood that don't have a common agreement and that his safety is at risk? Like, how many of the people who are passing judgment on him don't understand the anxiety and how unsafe it is to be a celebrity of his magnitude? Like, how much does that play a part, you think?
I played a part because birds of a feather flocks together. So normally celebrities tend to live among other celebrities, usually. So that's what I was saying. Where he living at now and who his neighbors today. That's what I'm kind of trying to get at. Like, who's his neighbors right now?
He's not around celebrities. I mean,
that's what I was saying. So I'm like,
a black man chose to live in a predominantly white neighborhood. So I don't think that's a consideration in terms of his safety. Rationally, most of, I don't want to say regular, middle class or so, if you were the only black person to move to an area, yeah, there would be other safety concerns at some point, but clearly he doesn't have those. So I don't think that applies to him.
So he's saying he feels safe around white people?
Yeah.
I shouldn't be laughing.
Right.
Well,
that was coming up in my head.
But it goes, I mean, you go ahead and laugh because it's funny. It's funny at the irony because it goes both ways. He feels safe around white people in rural Ohio, right? Which he shouldn't be, you know what I'm saying? Based on historical, precedents that it's, that rural white neighborhoods have set and communities have set with not only black people, but especially privileged and well-to-do black people. I mean, that was the foundation of a lot of assassinations, that I'm gonna call it what it is, and a lot of massacres back in the day was because there were too many black business owners that refused to leave. That's Tulsa. You know what I mean? But on the flip end, he can feel unsafe in rural white neighborhoods, but he probably feels unsafe, in the urban communities of any major city. Chicago, New York, that have a lot of black folks in there because of his status.
Oh my goodness. I mean, there are certain neighborhoods, even the neighborhood that I forget, it's Hyde Park with Obama and stuff. There are neighborhoods that would have the equivalent demographic to where he is, that he would be safe. I mean, even
did not
Ball
compare Dave Chappelle to Obama. You did not do that, Trisha.
Like,
hold on. No, seriously, I got to push back a little bit. Have you ever been to Hyde Park?
It's street by street. I have family, hi guys, that are in Chicago, and I would say it's street by street.
There have no cell phone. You have no cell phone connection once you get into a certain proximity of that man's neighborhood in the houses. Like, it shuts down. He ain't got it like that. He ain't got the Secret Service, protecting him. He does a stand-up on it. He got a shotgun. He did the whole stand-up on it in one of his specials. But I just think it gets incredibly hard. Like, I don't want people to know where I live.
He could go to like even Elgin or St. Charles. They have lovely places there.
I don't want to know where I live either.
Okay, I want to ask this question real quick, because I want to bring it more to home, because I think what we do on Seed Talk. We set it up, we lob it up with celebrity gossip news or whatever we do, what's ever trending, right? You feel me? But it don't really get real until we put it in perspective of our lives on a micro level. And I'll go ahead and go first and be honest. I don't want people knowing where I live, especially certain people knowing where I live, or coming over to my house. I've paid those dues. I've had griot parties where people come over to my house, you know what I'm saying? And I've gotten people talking about, I know where you live. We gonna pull up. I'm like, why would you tell me that, by the way? I stay ready. Okay. But it's like, so now all of a sudden I don't want to put myself around certain people because Logic has privilege and he makes a certain amount of money. He don't want people to know where he lives because I want to protect my privacy. And if a lot of people start to know where I live, or we start letting certain people in that know where I live, that I want to move, that's a problem.
With technology, anyone can find out where anyone lives right now. I'm sorry, unless you have a confidential address that you've had to, I guess, ask for through the court or whatever, anyone can find out where anyone lives.
But you know make it a lot easier, and you can make it a lot harder for people.
Oh, I disagree on that one, but
okay. Well, let me tell you this then. Okay, if that's the case, then how come a lot of my mail gets sent back if it's so easy to find out where I live? Because I haven't disclosed my address to a lot of new people. I mean, my work just now sent their W-2s back because they don't know where I live. Oh, my bad. I'll give you the address.
That's probably incompetence, but I know that find out where
the only one that
you're supposed to be online on your portal.
Find out anyone's
what I'm saying is, so okay, hold on. So what am I missing here? So if you can find out where I live, if it's that easy, like, it's not only them, it could be any of my credit card people, it could be my the Honda dealership. They send me stuff and I found out it gets sent back. Oh, it got sent back, return to sender. He must have moved. Let's just look him up and find out where he moved to and send it to the right address. There's a lot of incompetence going on out there.
Well, you said this is someone that really wants to find you versus somebody with credit offers or something. If someone really wants to find you, that's why, like, when you have a protection order, I had to ask for a confidential address. And then that's the way that they were able to mask where I live, because otherwise, it's public record. You can find out where pretty much anyone lives. So unless you specifically take steps.
Let's not mix it though. Let's not mix the fact that people can find out where you live with the fact that, do you want people to know where you live? Let's not mix it.
Well, clearly, if I have a protection order, I don't want someone to know where I live.
Right.
Protection order, but you have to specifically ask for a confidential address specifically.
Or are we saying unless I have a protection order against you, I want you to know where I live.
I think that's the default, is of knowing where people live.
Nah, I disagree. What do y'all think?
I don't want nobody to know where I live in. I live in an apartment, and I'm very, very low key about. I am very low key. Very little people since I lived in this apartment now going on 3 years. Literally, the only people that been here is my family and a couple of my friends. Everybody else do not. They know I'm in Austin, but they don't know what part. They cannot find. At least they probably can't find me. But hey, ain't nobody popped up yet. But I want to talk about.
Yeah, wait, real quick. I want my homeboy. My homeboy really needs to tap in to find this dude in California so he can get his 25,000 back then, because he don't know where he lives. So if it's so easy to find him, man, I want to help this brother get his money back.
He probably don't have a place of his own though. He may be staying with somebody, so there's that. He probably can't be found if he don't have his own place with his name on a lease on a property.
Yeah,
I mean that's just a theory. But I want to bring up a situation since we talking about property. Y'all, I mean, I'm not trying to take it off subject, but I'm to bring it back in a minute. Y'all remember the incident with, I think she was one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, and she bought those properties in those quote unquote white neighborhoods, and so many people got so outraged by that because there's people saying that, oh well, she's using the money that people donated to buy the home. That could or could not be the case, but apparently a lot of people issue was she was buying houses in a white neighborhood. And they were like, how come she didn't buy it in the black neighborhoods? And me being the person that I was, I said, what black neighborhood could she have bought a house at?
Mm-hmm. I mean, they exist out there. We talked about this offline. There's a lot of black neighborhoods that are well-to-do, but they just don't recognize them and celebrate them. If you go down south, you'll see it. Oh, well, you are down south.
Yeah, but I'm talking about someone of her tax bracket of a millionaire in LA. Is there one?
I don't know about that. I don't know about LA.
Yeah, I think she's in California. I'm not sure what other states she bought houses, but I don't know California was.
Baldwin Hills.
There's parts of Inglewood now that you can definitely get $1 million house.
Ladera, well, Lamart Park for sure, because the houses are going up. But yeah, you could get $1 million house there.
Well, but California, most houses would be $1 million. That's why they come down here to Texas buying up everything.
I just want to be realistic. I just want to be realistic, and I don't want to be disingenuous. There's a reason why a lot of celebrities, regardless of race and where they came from, move out of neighborhoods, certain neighborhoods. Or if they live there, they also have a lot of security. I don't want to make it seem like you can just live anywhere you want. And if you choose not to live somewhere because they have, some indicators that people might try to get your stuff, that you're being immoral. I mean, ain't that what we were saying with Nipsey?
Young Dolph.
We said I remember collectively, at least in the hip hop community, we were like, Nipsey, you'll probably still be alive, bro. It's not the fact that people are poor economically. The fact is that a lot of people follow a European value system that says, I'm going to take what you got because I don't have it. That's essentially the root and framework of colonialism. White people coming from cold tundra of Europe, lacking resources, down to Africa to pillage, and saying they were justified and entitled to take from indigenous and African peoples based on a simple fact that they didn't have it. And too many of our people think like that, unfortunately. And I just don't think it's an appropriate leap to say all of a sudden a person is immoral, you know what I'm saying, because they're a landlord and won't let someone with a certain credit score live in their place because they're trying to protect their investment. Like, why are certain security mechanisms set up to keep you financially secure then? What's the point of following any rules or safeguards? Like, my mom had to fight to get this black gentleman, and I'm being nice, out of her condominium. He was not acting like that when he moved in. So if my mother walks away from that situation and saying, not necessarily the skin color, but I'm going to look a little bit more in depth when it comes to credit score and recommendations and referrals, why not? She lost a lot of money through that. How do Black people who are economically prosperous stay economically prosperous if they keep helping out people who are less fortunate and they keep, you know what I'm saying, putting dents in their fortune to the point where we're all poor? Getting back to Trisha's point. Mm-hmm. How does that help us? It's best to plant seeds and donate and do charitable, you know what I'm saying, efforts to help people. But at some point you got to say, hey man, what's the purpose of both of us being poor? Jay-Z said, how can I help the poor if I'm one of them? I know it's more nuanced than that, but I always like that bar. What y'all think? Bobby, you're a homeowner. You talk that much.
I mean, I am a homeowner. I've helped friends break leases before. I've advised people on how to enforce contracts before. So I've seen both sides of it. I mean, literally, my partner, I remember when we were in school and she ran into a situation where the landlord was not fulfilling their obligations and we wanted to get out of the lease. And I said, I know how to break this lease. I'll tell you exactly what to argue in court. And she went there and she beat them in court because it's really, at the end of the day, you can make equity arguments when we talk about contract law and we talk about landlord-tenant relationships. And anybody, depending on the side they're on, can feel aggrieved. I mean, I guarantee you the person who you had a hard time getting out of your mom's place felt like they were in the right. And that's what's so incredible about it. You know, living conditions are so important in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like literally the base element. And so when we talk about base elements, you have to also understand that where there's a lack of it, you will see desperation, you will see PTSD essentially. You'll see people act out. But one thing that I know from my job is that everybody is willing at a macro level to show compassion when people respond from PTSD. But at a micro level, almost nobody is. So if somebody does something to someone you care about, it's let's hold them accountable. But if somebody does it to a third person, it's, oh my God, I wonder why they did this. And it's the same sort of thing that happens with landlord-tenant. Like if it's you that's impacted, if it's you that needs cheaper rent, if it's you that can't afford the rent, then it's, oh yes, this COVID, immunity from mortgage needs to continue on. But if you're the landlord and you understand the bank, by the way, is not accountable when it comes to the COVID moratorium, the banks are still asking the landlords for the rent. They're not stopping that. That didn't happen. So, like to your point, here I am, black landlord, renting to black tenant. Black tenant says, F you, I don't have to pay. But now as a result, I am no longer wealthy because I'm having to pay up the chain. And then you say, well, morally speaking, the bank is in the best position to take on that cost. But they're not going to. So what exactly do you think we should do? That's why I think Trisha's situation is so good, because they essentially, I'm not going to say they split the difference, but they at least reach common ground. And that's what you want to think happens. You want to believe that people are going to do that. But again, returning to my original point, people who are self-interested are the people who win in capitalism. So they don't even have incentive to help you out. And so we have in-group competition. And while people will point out that that is one of the worst things about our system, it's just an objective reality. And that's why you have to watch out for yourself. And that's why I don't blame Dave. That's why I don't blame myself when my first thought was, when I saw this house, it's like, oh man, everybody in the neighborhood keeps asking me if I was a renter, which was hilarious because I knew why they were asking, which was like, haha, very funny. But it was because they were concerned that I was going to do that thing that Dave is worried about. They were concerned about that. And then when they saw I was remodeling the house, then it was, oh my God, everybody wanted to come over and shake my hand because they knew that I was doing them a solid, because they were like, oh, our value is going to go up if he does that. And all of a sudden, then I was an acceptable human being. And that is gross. I 100% agree. But it's also the reality. And that's how people operate. They don't want to see the thing that they spent most of their life paying for decrease in value. And I'm not going to be upset about that because I understand.
Yeah. That's a word, man. I feel you on that. The biggest thing that I walk away from, and I said this offline, and I just really like the work that we do and appreciate the work that we do, all four of us, on this weekly commitment that we do. You know what I mean? But I said this offline, and it was a very spirited and very educational, back and forth on the Messenger. Shout out to Facebook Messenger. But no matter what, if you're a tenant or you're a landlord or you're homeless, I'm going to say that one more time. Whether you're a tenant, a landlord, or you're homeless, these eviction moratoriums are going to impact Black people the most, no matter what. That's the messed up thing about it. So at the same, when we're talking about, okay, what's the plan of action for homeless Black people, we also have to think, what's the plan of action and how that's going to impact tenants, how the plan of action for tenants is going to impact Black landlords. Because I'm speaking from lived experience. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna keep a buck with you. That's why when I let people, and I've done it before, I've rented and I've subleased to some Black people before. I've done it. You know what I mean? Sometimes I've rented and I let the landlord know, hey man, my partner's gonna be living here for a little bit. Whoop to whoop. Sometimes they're cool with this, sometimes they're not. I've also owned a house before. I owned my first house at 22. And that caused some strife in our marriage, man, because I'll be letting people live with us. Which, hey man, I would do the background check. I would vet them, not just like financially. Most of the time they were just living with me free because I already know what the deal is. Once you start get that paperwork going, what we were talking about. But the reality of it is that when we're talking about helping out other people, it's more than just money. You know what I'm saying? When you get traumatized people that are coming out of a homeless situation, or they're coming out of natural catastrophes like Katrina. Like I worked in a school district. A lot of people came up from Katrina. It was a culture shock for a lot of those people when they came here, and when we embraced them too, because they were going through trauma. These people were being called refugees in their own country. So there was a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of people that are still here from, from Louisiana, from that area, and it's like, when you're talking about helping out other Black people who are traumatized, like you got to have a plan. You got to have a plan, because going from being homeless to being housed, that's a big transition for a lot of people. I had a brother, friend of the family. You know how it starts off. I'll be here for 6 months. 6 months turns to a year turns into 2 years, And it turned into 4 years. But I had a plan. We didn't put anything in paper. He didn't pay me any rent, but he helped out with childcare. He gave me his EBD card. I'm going to keep it a buck. There it is. And when it was time for him to leave, when I moved, I gave him an option to live in a certain section of the home. He said, no, that's too small. And he figured it out. And now every holiday season since then, he sends his regards and says, thank you. But I think that too many times we think it's about blowing up an air mattress and making enough for an extra person to let someone live with you. And it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. You are letting a whole human being into your home with baggage, pun intended, double entendre, all that, for real. And I think a lot of times we don't look at that because, okay, the time that's going to take do a plan, I really ain't ready for that. And then if I don't take this person in, they're going to tell me that I'm like this, I'm like that, I'm going to get shamed, I'm going to get judged. Man, you better protect your family. Because you never know. You could bring someone in that has some trauma and they'll bring with you, did you know that, consistent calls to the police can get you evicted?
Yes.
That's grounds for eviction. You could be helping someone in a domestic violence situation. They could be living with you. And the fact that they call the police too much, all y'all could get evicted. Now, I'm not going to sit up on this TV, on this show, and be responsible and be act like you shouldn't be thinking about that. Just let anyone in. And if you don't let them in, you're wrong. You're morally corrupt. And I'm not saying anyone on this show is saying that. All I'm saying is, whether we're the homeless, we're the tenant, or we're the landlord, we're getting at the worst in this pandemic. So what's the plan of action?
I just wanted to address what Dave said because I think it's really important. Dave said there's a difference between protecting an investment and having, the opportunity to live somewhere. I just wanted to touch on that because one of the problems that we have in capitalism is that we broke the rules in capitalism early on with discrimination, because discrimination is not supposed to be a part of free market competition. If people were just allowed to live, where they could afford and remain there moving forward in time, right? Some of these areas that are getting gentrified look different, but we know that those areas look the way that they did originally because of redlining. And so just the whole concept of redlining perverts capitalism, because then, that's what opens the argument to members of our community saying, no, this area should not be something that's subjected to free market capitalism because it wasn't created by it. It was created by discrimination. And that's a totally reasonable response to say, well, no, you can do that capitalism everywhere, but not in the neighborhood you forced us to go into. That's ours. I 100% understand that argument. And I think that that's why, as far as a plan of action is concerned, we do have to support our people who have the resources to create these safe zones for community. We cannot try to burden them further because ultimately it's going to be too hard for us to expand without some bag of capital. Somebody has to have the capital to do it. Just like Paul Allen could knock down the promenade and put Vulcan apartments there in this area that was historically redlined for Black people. If there was somebody in our community that generated enough wealth, whether it was through real estate or otherwise, they could do that same thing. They could choose to build multifamily housing. But what you're not going to be successful in doing is telling people how to spend their money. You just never will. It just won't work. So telling Dave that he has to invest in multifamily housing or he has to support it is just going to get further resistance because that's just how ego works. We can't tell people what to do with their money. It never works.
What y'all think? Trish, Precious?
Y'all made some good points. I mean, I was reading Carmelita's comments, and I see 100% what she's trying to say. I do get what she's trying to say, and that's why I say this type of situation is not really a black and white. It's more of a rich and versus poor. The overall, and yes, classes. I think. Well, I do feel it affects everybody. However, I think it really does affect us even more. I think it affects us so much more. But yeah,
I
I mean,
we aren't going to dismantle systemic racism by being classist towards one another. And even, for example, you were giving an example about, renting to people with looking at their credit scores and things like that. We know that systemically, Black people start off with a credit score 100 points lower, and that's data, than white people. And yet we're going to use that same system to essentially discriminate against one another. It's like we're coming up with reasons to justify redlining against one another. And we're using capitalism and classism against one another to justify treating one another this way. When I was a renter, it got to the point that when I would go for places, if I saw the landlord was Black, which is ridiculous as a Black woman, if I saw the landlord was Black meeting me, I knew that I wasn't going to get it, regardless of even putting the application in, because they were much harder towards me putting this bar. I've had people that will apply for a place, and if I see that you're planning to rent a place for me and you have a 720 credit score or something, I'm talking to you, why are you still renting? Why don't you try and buy some? So I'm encouraging them to purchase something, not, oh, let me exploit you because you have this credit score and I know that you're going to be a great tenant for me. No, I'm trying to think about what's best for other people. We shouldn't justify being classist against one another. And this assumption that because other Black people don't meet what European people that have a head start in terms of applying, that they're automatically going to, or I won't say automatically, they have a preponderance towards destroying your property and being disrespectful. And also, as a landlord, you should treat your tenants with respect and communicate with them more often, because if you communicate with them a lot, they're less likely to be pissed off and destroy your house, because they're like, this is someone that I've been asking for them to fix a faucet for a year and I've never seen them. Okay, I'm not getting paid now, so screw you. I'm not gonna. You have to treat people like human beings and communicate with them, and stop treating each other like garbage, as if systemic racism doesn't exist and it doesn't impact the people you're renting to.
Well said. So I just have a couple questions. So if you have 4 Black people interested in your property that you're renting out, you don't choose the person based on their rental history and their credit score? If it's 4 Black people, how do you choose the 4?
Rental history and credit score are 2 different things.
I know, but it's still part of the same qualifications.
I'm less likely to care about credit score than rental history. So I would like to know, just because someone has especially if you're talking like divorced woman or someone that's just because they have a crappy credit score, as long as I know you've been paying the rent, I know you're going to pay rent before everything else and your utilities, I'm less likely to care about that, because when I've done the metric of caring about the credit score, those are the times that I've been, because I ignore everything else thinking that, oh, this person has a perfect credit score, so they're going to be fine. They've been the ones that, because you're ignoring all the other red flags because of this one perfect Eurocentric metric, that's when I've been burned. So I'm more likely to look at
I understand what you're saying, and I feel misunderstood because I felt that there's a hyper focus on the word credit score, and I think that was a trigger point for a lot of people in this panel, and then maybe outside too.
There were a couple of other trigger points, but that was just the.
What I'm saying is, what is the metric system to qualify or disqualify someone when all the applicants are Black? Because look, I could come to you, right? So I could be one of 3 people. It could be Bobby, it could be Precious, and myself. and I didn't pay my rent on time for like 3 months because I was out of job because I felt like my employer was being racist. You know what I mean? So there's got to be some kind of metric system that's going to qualify Bobby or Precious over me based on me not paying my rent on time or me showing up, doing certain things that you didn't want someone living in your unit doing. I don't know. Maybe I showed up high. I don't know what it is, but there has to be some kind of metric system and some kind of qualifiers and disqualifiers that you go by that become indicators of who's going to be a better tenant or not for you to make a choice. Because I doubt that you're putting names in a hat and pulling them out and say, the apartment's yours, logic. Why? Because I chose your name out of the hat.
But
So
I haven't said that. I haven't said that.
What I'm saying is
history,
what
as
I'm
well as employment.
What is it? What qualifies someone?
I've just said
it. Are Black.
Rental history, employment history, and then last of all things, I would probably look at credit score because I'm renting. If I have someone that has a near perfect credit score and is paying me like 10,000, first, last, and security on a place, I'm going to try and support them to buy their own place and say, why are you renting? Because you should be buying and building equity. So I've referred those type of people and supported them in buying their own place versus wasting rent with me and realizing that I'm renting to people that are in that gray area until they can build up so that they can eventually buy their own place, because that's what this capitalist society, it's about buying your own place and building equity. I'm trying to build up people versus just economic discrimination against people.
Right. And I understand that. I'm trying to learn, so I appreciate the opportunity to learn. So have you ever had a bad experience with a bad Black tenant? And were there any indicators that came before that said that they were going to go that route of being bad? A bad tenant, whatever you want to call a bad tenant is, whether it's destroying your property, whether it's not paying on time, where you have the evicted. Have you ever had a quote unquote bad, unfortunate, or, Black tenant? And was there any indicators of that they were going to be that way?
I have, but this was a couple. She later brought her boyfriend in who turned out to wreak havoc into her life as well as my place. But I encouraged her to break the lease by getting a protection order because in Washington, that's automatic. So when you get that, so that's how
that's fair.
I was communicating, found out you have this guy in this place who's doing all kinds of things that are legal as well as beating up on you. So I'm going to help you break the lease to get out. But that's the importance of communicating and finding out what's going on. But I have had, and that was more on the tenant because she should not have moved him in. But once he was in, he was in.
So thank you for sharing that. So as you move forward, when you have a tenant that fits that profile, will you use that as indicators that this is not going to be a good experience as a landlord and a tenant? Would you use that as criteria? If, is that fair? Is that ethical? Do you have a boyfriend that's abusive? Do you have a girlfriend that's abusive that's going to cause me as a landlord to be in a messed up situation where my investment is not going to be protected? Is that fair?
Usually they ask if anyone is supposed to be living with you. Usually that question pops up, like who is all going to move in? Is it just you? Is it your children or your parents? Who is all moving in? And secondly, we also ask for pay stubs, at least the last 2 or 3 pay stubs back to see if you can even afford to live there. We kind of get a whole, at least now how we do it, we kind of get a whole backstory, like where are you coming from? What made you choose? Because the property we have is in Georgia, but it's out in the country. We had remodeled it. It looks very nice, but it is out in the country. So we do say, look, this is out in the country. Is this the type of area you are capable of adapting to? Because it's not in a city, because it's like 3 hours from Atlanta. So if you we always give that sort of disclaimer. This is out in the country, but it's very quiet out there. I mean, there's other people live there, but it's pretty quiet. So we normally do like a whole background. We do background checks. We do get driver license. We kind of do it kind of like what apartments tend to do. We kind of go the same route. Credit score, it hadn't really been much. We don't make that such a big one. We look at the other factors because we know this the one that we didn't look at thoroughly tend up to be the biggest problem. Credit score wasn't necessarily the issue. It was the other factors.
I know. That's
But
you know
that's just our personal experiences.
I'm learning. Don't say that again. And I understand the disparities that happen with credit scores. I know the economic racism that exists with that. But getting back to Trisha, does that become indicators and going to your criteria next time you rent? So that wasn't a good experience.
Well, and that was on me because when the lease says, you're supposed to notify 2 weeks if someone's there longer, and then they're notifying and I didn't follow. So that was me being a bad landlord with not being consistent, because if the lease says one thing and this sounds terrible, I probably should have just started eviction at that point when you're bringing someone else in, because she could have afforded the rent on her own. But, I was like, oh, well, I'll cut a break and, it's her boyfriend and everything, and that's fine. So that was on me for being I don't want to say a bad landlord, not being you have to have boundaries that you communicate and you follow through on when you're a landlord.
If you had sound like moral considerations, that's what it sounds like. Those sound like moral considerations.
Right. But she had revealed that in the beginning. If you had known that in the beginning, it's safe to say that she would have been disqualified.
Yeah, probably, because you're lying on the application.
And I think that's where we have some intersection. When I was going through my whole thing, I was just being 100. I'm just keeping a kilo with you. Like, that's how I run my life. Like, whether my address is accessible or not, you can find it or not. There's a certain criteria that fits in. Like, you've been in my house before, Precious. I mean, sorry, Trisha. Yeah. Like, there's a certain criteria that, like, I don't want whether you can find it or not. When I have a griot party, I had to lower it from having 40 to 50 people, where people are back to back, front to front, me shooting music videos in there, to like 10 or 12. Because it becomes an issue. You have to have some kind of criteria and a profile of the people that you bring into your investment. And your most important investment is your children. Mm-hmm. It became an issue. Like, do I want people knowing where I live and help them out by putting it out on Facebook? People were like, why are you doing that, bro? My son was like, why are you doing that? I was allowing my son to live here at my home for free. My daughter can live here for free. My other son, all my children live here for free.
Oh, that's good.
That's my biggest contribution to anyone. Those are my most important tenants that live for free. As long as I gave them free housing, give them food, clothing, and shelter if they may need it, I'm not really worrying about who else I'm denying opportunity in my house who's a stranger. I don't know. That's just how I see it.
You haven't had a kid show up to turn homework at your house? When I was teaching at a certain Seattle school, I did not give out my home address, but I had a student drop off a paper that they didn't want to be late. And I'm like, how did you find out my address? So that's when I realized, oh, okay. And he later showed me how he found out my address.
I respect it.
Dude. I just want to go into let's go into the plan of action. I still got to work out and stuff today. But I appreciate this robust conversation. I learned a lot. But listen, I just want my first plan of action is this. Like, I don't want you to like go into allowing anyone to stay in your investment and any kind of legal bindings, with worrying about if, what I do is going to get me canceled or not, or people want to look at me a certain way. I think the most important investment is yourself and the peacefulness of your home, whether you have children or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I'm in a situation right now. I'm speaking from lived experience. Like, I don't want anyone out there to think, I don't think you should help Black people, but don't be dumb. Don't be dumb. I'm doing it right now. I'm doing it right now. And it started during the pandemic. You know what I'm saying? I took someone in. It's being done now. So don't get it twisted. But what I'm saying is, have a plan, stick to it, and set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to help everybody. That's why you don't have the same blood type as everybody. You're not supposed to help everybody. That's my plan of action. Someone else can go next.
I guess I'll go. Property is wealth. Land and property is wealth, is land. I was watching Gone with the Wind a little earlier. Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies to watch. And he literally said that land is the most wealthiest thing you can have because it's the only thing that never leaves. It's not going anywhere. It's always going to be there. Mm-hmm. With that being said, your well-being, your peace of mind is wealthier. With that being said, you should guard. I'm speaking from personal experience, and we're going through something very similar right now, but that's with family. But that's a whole different subject in itself. But anyway, the point is, when you are making an investment, you should want to protect it. But I think we also should be honest with ourselves that we got to be careful that we're not being discriminative at the same time. Don't think because somebody is the same color as you or look like you is going to bring problems and the other person is not. In other words, you should bet everybody on the same damn level. Everyone should get checked. Everyone should get clocked if they don't meet a certain kind of boundary or a certain requirement. Hey, you laughing, but we done had all walks of life in our rental. We done seen some shit. So right now, you kind of have to play that game kind of hard there. But overall, with Dave Chappelle, he did what he felt was right. Is it hypocritical? Hell yeah, it is. But I hope that as long as he knows he was being hypocritical, but something tell me he's not. Hey, it is what it is sometimes. But that's my point of point of action.
Yeah, yeah. Let me give you a yeah, because I got a white landlord right now, and he's definitely approaching standard. Definitely approaching. If we're talking about standard-based grading, he's definitely approaching standard. But go ahead. Who wants to go next?
He's approaching standard. He doing good? He doing bad?
He's approaching standard. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, okay. We're gonna leave right there. Then. For legal purposes, it's best not to say it because you may have to take that ass to court like we did. But that's a different story too. I would take your ass to court.
He's definitely white. He's definitely white. He got like 5 properties too. So. Trisha, you want to go next? Bobby, what's up?
I guess I'll go. You want? Oh, well, like I have there, vet everyone, and that includes your landlords too, because there are ways to check. Please check to make sure your landlord actually owns the house. That I had another rental experience where I rented a place that the landlord was actually in bankruptcy, and I was paying them, and then had a notice on the door that I had to move. But I was paying them rents, then I had to go to the court. So vet your landlord, vet the people that you're renting to. Realize that the importance of housing. I mean, housing should, I guess, be a human right, but in capitalist society, it's not. And we're the only animals that charge each other for our housing and don't really build our own housing. Other animals, you just, create your own housing, but and it should be a right, but it's not. But it's also, as Precious said, a way to build equity. So yeah, plan of action is just vetting people and sticking to your boundaries. And please, you can go to, I guess, your county assessor's website to make sure that they're current on their taxes, that they really own the place, and maybe even search their names to make sure that they are a landlord that respects their tenants, that they don't have too many complaints against them. It goes both ways.
Man, that's great advice, man. I feel like I need to do my homework.
And I want to add another advice for landlords, whatever. When you're renting out a property, make sure you have a checklist of everything in that apartment, from the appliances to the walls, the bathroom. Check everything. If there's something that's broken need to be fixed, make sure you have it in your checklist and get it repaired before the new renter get in. So when a new renter come in, make them do their own checklist and make sure they have within 24 hours to turn in that sheet. So that way, if something were to get damaged or something that was broke or whatever, you have something to cover you, and you as a tenant can cover yourself. Just FYI.
Free game out here.
I gave y'all some advice. Next time I'm charging.
Yeah, I'll stick with that. I'll stick with the advice theme for all of you guys who are renting. There's this thing called a constructive eviction. Constructive eviction is very useful. Constructive eviction allows you to break a lease. The constructive eviction basically says that there's something about your apartment that even though you're paying rent, you might as well be homeless. So, for example, during the wintertime, if there's no heat, that's a constructive eviction. They might as well have kicked you out. If during the summertime there's no running water, that's a constructive eviction. They might as well have kicked you out. If you have a utility or an appliance that is not working and they've been made aware of it on several occasions, you need to document that. The mere fact that they have not fixed that appliance could also be a constructive eviction. Again, that is a way to break a lease, and they might have to pay you after the fact. Now, be careful when it comes to making your own assessment about whether you owe rent. That is not good. It's not the way to do it. For the most part, if you can't afford to, there's this thing where you can put your rent money in an escrow account. The escrow account will count as a rent payment. It is basically money to a third party. That money to a third party will suffice for your rent payment before the court makes a determination on whether it's owed. This way, you are not also breaking the lease, because if you do not pay the rent and they're saying, well, we did not essentially provide this service because you did not pay the rent, you would have essentially closed the loop on your own argument. So keep that in mind. So that's the advice portion, the legal advice portion for tonight. This has worked for me. This literally got my girl out of the lease. I literally have seen this in action. I've made this argument before. It works. Okay, so that's that. Now, as far as the advice for just what we talked about tonight, my advice is always going to be the same, which is make a decision. You can decide really early on. Like Trisha has made a decision. Trisha has decided that she's not going to be in this for profit. She'll make enough money to make it profitable, but she is essentially operating like a nonprofit organization. If you want to do that, that's fine. I'll never tell somebody to not be into the nonprofit world or not provide a service to people who need it. However, if you want to be for profit, do not invest yourself in these sorts of moral arguments. You cannot do both. You will not be successful. If you say to yourself, just like in Trista's scenario, I'm going to be for profit, and then one of your renters breaks your lease, and you say, I'm going to give them a break, and then that person who comes into the house damages your property. Okay, they're not even on the lease, so how are you going to sue them? You're not going to be able to sue them. They're not liquid. They don't have money. You can't lean on any of their resources because they own nothing. So now you're out of pocket. That is not how you make money. That's how you lose money. That's how you lose a lease. That is how you're not able to choose who lives there. That's how you can't help the community. So make a decision. That's my advice.
Bobby, what kind of lawyer are you? Like, what's your field? Is it? I mean, I know you're a prosecutor, but I'm trying to. What's your line of work?
All I do is criminal law, but I do have experience in torts, and because I've lived in an apartment before, and because I don't like being taken advantage of, I have been known to utilize what I know about landlord-tenant to my benefit and to my friends' benefit where they've needed it. There are places in New York that will not rent to lawyers because they know their facilities are below code.
Yeah.
And if you're below code, you cannot charge rent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important distinction. So if you ever go to a place, and they look at your profession and they decide you're too smart to live here, it's probably because they don't plan on meeting their obligations, but they do plan on collecting rent.
Yeah.
There you have it.
Man.
Bobby. You know what, Bobby? You have a lot of people in Austin, because down south Austin, a lot of people still do not have clean water due to the ice storm we had last year. There's still people down south Austin still having those issues. Like they just had on the news, 2-3 weeks ago, they were talking about it. I'm like, damn, it's been a whole year.
And that's more complicated, because what's going to happen is there's going to be an argument that there's been a change of circumstances from the landlord. They're going to say they don't have an actual opportunity to provide the water. But that's exactly why I said the escrow account is such an effective thing, because you don't want to get yourself evicted because you're not paying rent, even though you feel they're not entitled to it. But you also don't want to give them the money, right? So when you give it to this third party and you start that legal process, your bases are covered, because you can be returned all of that rent money at the end if you win. So they never had it, because if it was in their hands, right, they would say, we reinvested it in our facilities. I'm sorry, we don't have any left in accounts receivable. Okay, but that's why they don't ever get it. So it's a trap. I mean, the whole landlord tenant is a mess. It's a mess.
Very, very.
Also, there's this thing called a novation. So always ask about this. A lot of times people will enter a lease and then something will change about their financial situation. And they will tell you, well, we only allow you to break the lease if you're willing to pay 6 months of rent. Okay, fine. That's their policy. But if you have the opportunity, you can ask them if they have a novation fee. And a novation fee is the fee to break the lease. And it's usually like 2 months of rent instead of 6. So just ask.
Who we ask, the renter or the landlord, or who we going? And
You ask the landlord if you want to break your lease, do you have a novation fee? And if they say they have a novation fee, then usually that means that they have essentially a one-time payment that will allow you to break the lease. That's different from them trying to mitigate losses over the rest of the lease period. So like Trisha could tell you, she had an opportunity, and this is why I said make a decision. She had an opportunity to sue that tenant for the entirety of the lease. And then when the lease is over, she could have tried to sue her again, essentially, for the price that she incurred to actually advertise that opening. Now, she made a decision not to do that.
Yeah.
But she could have. So you have to keep that in mind. That's why if you're going to break your lease, you really need to make sure you do it in a clean way, because they're entitled to try to get damages from you. Now, they have to mitigate. She has to try to get somebody in there, but you're responsible for paying for her efforts to try to get somebody in there. And that's what people don't realize.
And what if apartment does not have the novation that you speak of?
Well, then that's where you're going to have to start looking at equity arguments, and you're going to have to really try to make a good argument why you need to be able to break the lease without paying whatever their acceleration fee is or whatever their damages are. And usually you can negotiate, because it's also expensive for them to litigate against you. That costs money as well for them.
Mm-hmm.
But they usually got more money than you, though, Bobby.
They do have more money than you, but they don't want to spend it.
Right.
Hey, I've come across very few instances in my life where they have not exercised that option.
Hey, Bobby training me, boy. I'm logging all this in. I don't have no breaking thing, but
I strive to be responsible, because I don't want to leave on that note, being like, oh yeah, they got money, but they probably don't want to spend it, and then people out there acting reckless because they don't want to spend the money, and the next thing you know, they spending the money, and you butt out jeans like Prince. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. You're right. They can afford to litigate. But if it's easier for them to collect half of the remaining lease, and not litigate it, that would be more rational than paying the retainer fee for their attorney, which exceeds your actual lease period.
Yeah. Plus, they got to show your house afterwards anyway.
Shout out to Dr. Diamond and my brother, Bobby, for teaching us tonight. And
Precious too, because Precious is the one with the experience up there.
I know. I can't. Damn. I was going to give her special isolated props, but okay.
Oh, well, you give it to me.
Anyway, give it to you.
Come on, I'm greedy. Give it to me. Give it to me.
Thank you for Precious giving her own, like, personal anecdotes of, like, the vetting process that they do and whatnot. So this was good. This was good, man. It has a lot of layers. I think we should do it again with Dave Jones and then some other, Black landlords and tenants and just get nuanced with it and stuff, because it's real complicated. You know what I mean? And I never want to get away from the point that, again, that there's one way to help other Black people. There's multiple ways to help a Black person. And, I hate to say it, too many times it can look Precious as smiling. Too many times it comes down to putting that oxygen mask on yourself first. I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. But listen, February 26th, Live from Richmond Bookstore, live in-person griot party experience at 5 p.m. And it's going to be broadcasted on Facebook, Logic on Men, Facebook, Logic on Men TV, and Facebook, Griot Party, and on YouTube. So February 26th, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Griot Party experience, spoken word storytelling theater. We out, man. Another great episode. Hey, real quick before we get off, I've been getting inboxes being like, man, I love your panel. You know what I'm saying? I got one specific shout out to Precious, like just saying, like, you're so funny. You know what I'm saying? And just, you bring that diversity and that uniqueness to all of us. And we all are so different, and I just want to let y'all know, giving us our flowers now. I've been getting inboxes and people really love what we're doing. So let's keep going. Let's keep moving. Consistency is what's up. And then shout out to Precious and Trisha starting their own after hours, the spinoffs. That's what it's all about. Seed Talk is all about not only the tree, but the branches that come out of it. And then out those branches come more seeds, and then we create more trees. See how it works? It's called
planting seeds overnight.
Oh boy.
I love y'all. Peace. We out.
All right, see ya.